now tuned into the greatest.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sage Be Me podcast. I'll be your host today with
Anonymous 99.
on the following episodes from today, we'll be having like conversation skills. Basically, this is to build up how you associate with people. Like it'll be like a conscious decision on how you'll be making friends and moving forward conversations. So after like going through whatever we'll be going through, it'll be a step by step on things that you can immediately use, both on guys friends or female friends, but mostly we are focusing on just the female aspect on it. This will be the first module, but I'll take you through what we'll be going through for the following like 7 to 8 modules. Yeah. So the first module will be talking about what makes a good conversation, what separates a smooth talker and the boring guy, techniques for building topics and how you're going to direct a conversation, and we'll be having tips for bearing more emotional conversations with people. That's the first module. Module 2, we'll be talking about creating, crafting and playful conversations. Module 3 will be creating flirtatious conversations. Module 4 will be a banter workshop where we basically just talk about banter. Module 5 will talk about rapport building, a blueprint on rapport with people and getting connections. Module 6 will be how to mix everything up all together. And we're going to finish up module 7 by guys going out there and implementing the practical skills that we've set out. So, Anonymous, tell us, what makes a good conversation?
I think in my opinion, what makes a good conversation is successful communication. So if you're communicating and you both understand what is trying to be conveyed by the other person and you're responding in kind, and the other person is also understanding or understands what you're saying, then I think that's a good conversation.
Mm-hmm. So basically, when guys say communication is key, it's not the key. You also need to open the padlock with the key.
Sort of, yeah. It's very important to make sure that whatever you're saying is being understood the way you want it to be understood, because you might be saying one thing, but it sounds completely like something else.
Yeah. So for me, how I take it is like I use that phrase, communication is key, but it's not a key until it opens the padlock. Yeah. So communication and comprehension, that's how you lead and how you move forward.
Yeah.
Have you ever had like conversations that were terrible? Like there's this one time that I started talking to someone. Yeah. I kept on asking her questions after questions, and it's like the conversation wasn't moving forward. It was just me interviewing her. I'll call that the interview mode, because I'm just asking questions and she's just replying, and it felt boring. It felt, is it okay if I say sad? Because it wasn't moving the way I wanted it to move. It was just like, have you ever had such?
Labored conversations. It feels like it's work. It feels like you have an assignment or a homework that you have to do, and it feels like you're struggling to push through something that you have to do. I've had many of those. I think there was a time when I don't really consider myself as a natural seductionist, but I think because some of us had to learn, actively, not through life experiences. And so I think before that period, I was very difficult. I found it very difficult to hold fun and engaging conversations, especially with the opposite sex. I also found it very difficult just generally whenever I was out of practice. So it's something that needs frequent practice, repetition, just like most other skills, it's like you have to keep the skill sharp. So if you stop doing it for a while, you also kind of lose touch and you stop being as good as you were before, you know. So
it's something that you always build. You're always building.
Yeah, you're always building upon it. So even now, if I haven't had, like currently, I haven't been out a lot, or haven't been communicating with very many people all the time or frequently. So it's most likely going to be leopard. But of course, over time, after a few conversations, you get back into the groove. You know,
it just flows like a river. So, what can you tell us separates a smooth talker and the guy who bores women?
The ease of expression. So like a smooth talker, it's like for them, it's very easy for them to communicate what they want. They make the other person feel at ease in the conversation. They communicate what they want to communicate, and they do it in an easy way, in a smooth way, such that the other person doesn't feel like you are conducting like an assignment or a job. You know? It feels like almost like effortless.
From both parties.
For both parties.
And it's kind of fun and engaging for each and everyone.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Because there are people who I talk to, man, it just comes so smoothly and easily. And there are others, one, you ask something or talk about something, then you're like, the way she responds is like he doesn't understand whatever it is you're talking about, and you're left wondering, like, how come it's this strenuous? How come it's this boring? Like, you expect it to be more because the reason you went to him or her, it's because you wanted to engage someone on a conversation. Anyways, after that, let's move to, do you have like a technique for building topics that you want to be talked about, and you direct the conversation with your techniques?
At the end of the day, you have to have a plan. You have to have like a strategy, right? You have to know exactly what you intend to get from a conversation. It's not always like every conversation has to have like an end game. It's like you don't have to have like a motive for everything. But for most of the times, especially I think from what you're trying to ask, you kind of are implying you want to achieve something through the conversation, right? So it's very important to have it's very important to know exactly what you want from a conversation, and the order also matters. So it's almost like war. It's almost like battle. You have to have a strategy and you have to know how to implement it. So different people do it differently, of course. And for me, I think I do, but I don't think I consciously have a plan as I'm going in. So like maybe initially, if I want to get to know, if I want to get to know someone, if I want to get to know, I mean, it's a first encounter, so maybe I'm just introducing myself, or I'm getting to know someone. You know, the strategy initially is to first disarm them, right, to make them feel comfortable, right, then to build some comfort as well, so that there's some sort of rapport, like
between the two guys.
Exactly. And then finally, I tend to. The idea is to set up a meeting, right, or a meetup, or a date or something, right? So you kind of try to get to know the information. So what do they do? You can ask their age if you want to. It's not usually very necessary, but you can usually estimate by certain information that they give you how old they might be. What do they do for fun? What do they like to do in their free time? You know, and then when are they usually free? And then you set up a meetup where you can both agree on an activity and a time before you ask for like a phone number. So that's usually my strategy. It's quite straightforward. I don't really have a.
That's really straightforward.
Yeah.
In the sense that you actually talked about intention.
Yeah.
Like when you have an intention, there's usually like maybe you want to learn something, you want to understand something, or you just have this specific goal in mind.
Yeah.
And I figured that many guys don't really like set their eyes on the intention. Like there's this one time that I used to approach girls, let's take an assumption that I'm seated next to her in a mat, yeah. So I'm just chilling, and she sits next to me. Then I think she's cute, so I want to talk to her. I greet her, ask her name, then we start a random conversation. Yeah, like the other day I was in one, and I started talking to one. My opener was like, I recently broke. Oh, my niece broke my glasses. So I saw her with glasses. So I was like, how did you get your frames? Like, that's what was my opener.
Yeah.
So after that, the conversation just flew inside. We started talking about engineering, and I was like, you're about engineering? As in, it was just this fascination. Yes, I didn't end up taking her number, but I ended up having her details where I can like get in contact with her. So well, in that conversation, I did not have an intention of getting her number.
Yeah.
My intention was like, how can I get the information on how to get like the friends?
Yeah, and with every conversation, it's not necessarily like the goal doesn't have to be very tangible. You know, it can be just something as simple as, you know, I'd like to talk to somebody new today, or I'd like to find out about something as simple as maybe I want to find out about a student's opinion on a certain topic. So it can be very specific, or it can also be very vague. But usually there's always a goal. Most of the times there's a goal to every conversation, right?
Yeah.
Unless it's a very sometimes there's no goal. I mean, it's a very like random encounter. Maybe you are sitting at a park somewhere and something happens, and turns out somebody next to you also saw the same thing that was happening, and you just both made a remark and a conversation started.
Yeah.
And it was very random, and there's not really intention to the conversation, right? Maybe you're just discussing what has just happened in front of you.
So that makes sense. So there's that. That makes a lot of sense. So like when you start a conversation, how often do you like direct the conversation to like whatever it is that you want to talk about?
Always. I always direct it. So the thing is, it doesn't have to sound like an interview, of course.
Yeah, that's right.
So you don't have to follow up one question with the next. You can take detours during the conversation. So it can be like, I found out your name, and you don't even have to find out the name before you found out what she does. It can just be random, as long as the details add up to whatever you want at the end of the day. That's all that matters. So you can just start with, like a random fact. Or you ask them a question, what do you think of this and this and this, right? Or I have this argument with my friend who's standing right there, and we want to find out, like, you are a tiebreaker, tell us, what do you
Think about it.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, you can spice it up, but you always need to be leading the conversation, and you need to find it's like you have to get to your end goal. Right? Because if you don't get to your end goal, fine, it's not really a failure, but you've also kind of failed
because you didn't achieve what you wanted.
Exactly, yeah, so there's that.
Because you actually talked about a lot on how you direct the conversation, as in you have to direct the conversation.
Me too, yeah.
You say this, and I figured that there's this conversation. There's a time that, I'm talking with this girl, yeah? And like I've started a conversation, and I'm feeling like this conversation is going to die. Like you sense it, and
Yeah.
I'm sure on her side she senses what's happening to her.
Yeah.
So like the conversation is going to die, and at the back of my mind I'm like, maybe she'll change. Maybe she'll change the topic. Maybe she'll just think of something out of the ordinary. And it came to my mind that not every person out there does this.
Yeah.
And at times, if you let her direct the conversation, it ends up being boring, and you're like, why the hell am I texting her? Or why am I talking to her?
Sure.
And the conversation is just dry like this.
At the end of the day, you're not just talking to someone for the sake of talking to them, right? Okay, especially for me, because I'm very bad at keeping up with a lot of communication and keeping up with a lot of texting. So usually, even if it sounds like I'm just fumbling about and we're just talking about anything and everything, there's usually a goal to every conversation. Maybe I'm actually just talking to you so that like we can have a few laughs. Maybe I'm feeling down and I needed to get cheered up. So, but there's always a goal. There's always a goal, You can't just be fumbling about it. You need to be leading into something.
And so like most guys, I've been hearing this, like, I don't know when it came up, but it came up and it's like mad right now. Guys have been talking about you have to have value, you have to build your value, but it's not necessarily like when you talk about value it's monetary. When you talk about value, it's not necessarily like I have this skill, like fine, I can play basketball, you can play football, but what does that value bring to us at the moment when we've just met up somewhere in the street? It's basically useless. Or fine, I have money, or I'm from a trip to Dubai and I'm back. Knowing that I'm from a trip, that doesn't really benefit you in any way, because you're bored or you're looking for entertainment somewhere else. Then this guy is telling me that he's from a trip to Dubai. That's basically not the value like people essentially talk about. So what value do you think, or what value do you bring? So when we talk about value, we're basically talking about something to do with someone's bored, and because 90% of the guys out there, they basically have nothing to do, or are basically just chilling and waiting for something to happen so that they can entertain themselves. Let's take Kenyans per se. Most of the time you'll just find someone looking at statuses just to see, like, to get rid of the boredom that they have. So when you meet up with someone like physically face to face, they're expecting you, like, when you start talking to them, it means that you have leverage. So like, what value are you bringing to them? What do you think people actually mean when they say you have value
to a conversation? I think when you mentioned something about somebody talking about how they've had experiences in Dubai, they've gone out and done this and that, they've achieved this and that. In fact, that's one of the worst ways to communicate with anyone, and especially one of the worst ways to communicate with somebody of the opposite sex, especially as a man and to a woman. What I mean is it demonstrates low value in the man, especially because you have sort of like
an insecurity.
Paradoxical. Yes, it's like you if you have to tell somebody how big you are, then that means it's sort of it shows like a lack of self-belief or self-reassurance, self-assurance. It's like you are not very confident in your own value or in how people will take you, so you have to pump yourself up and puff out your chest or something so that people can. It's just generally very bad, right? Especially if you're trying to seduce someone, it's very, very bad to boast in their face. So it's actually much better if you want to say all those things. It's much better to include it in a story or to give an example of something that's happened in your life, and then you can drop some of those facts. But you can drop some of those facts not as like a sort of enrichment of your character, or like trying to describe yourself using those facts, but more like part of an explanation of something that has happened before to you, right? So you say, for example, you could say something like, the last time I was flying over blah blah blah, I saw blah blah blah, right? This can imply that you're a pilot, right? Or that maybe you've traveled by air to some place, and that didn't necessarily tell someone that, I fly around all the time to blah blah blah. You can just somebody can pick off certain information through the stories that you give about yourself, which is even better than you going out to tell them about you. And let me tell you one more thing about women that I've heard from another woman, a woman that I dated before, is she told me that it is much better for a woman to discover something attractive or an attractive attribute about you than for them to be told by you about that attractive attribute. In fact, if they found out without you trying, it's even much better than if you even expressed it in a story. It does, because it shows you don't really depend on your achievements or on your status for your attractability or attractiveness to the opposite sex. You don't really depend on such things to tell them so that they can take you in a certain standing. You get?
Yeah.
So the girl now starts to think, what else is this person hiding? Maybe he has more valuable things that he's not telling me about himself.
Maybe something interesting, something that is more entertaining, worth being around him.
Which could imply things about your personality. Things like the fact that you may be very industrious, the fact that you're very adventurous, the fact that you try out new things and you're exploratory. It's like it's the things that they find out about you, about your character, that can also be shown in what you have or what you have done, that intrigue them and that really draw them in. That's very important. You don't say, I usually date very hot women like Rihanna or blah blah blah. If she finds out through maybe your or her Facebook post, it's even more effective than if you told her.
So one thing about myself, I noticed that while approaching, it can be like a woman who I know. Most of the time, I'm talking to like a woman who like I want to take it further with, or I've just met but she's puzzled me. I get this fear, like the fear that I have. Most I've seen is I don't get the fear that she will slap me because I said something, or she'll be extremely negative, like, why are you talking to me? I don't know you. That's never been the fear that I've experienced. Most of the time it's like this other fear, like let's say I start talking to her, then after I talk to her, she responds, then I'm left wondering, what the hell should I say? And that has been frightening, but eventually you overcome that fear. So can you tell us more about this fear and
the fear of having a conversation go in a direction that you cannot continue, or the fear
of you've started a conversation and you've not like have a specific goal on how you want it to go?
See, that's the problem with not having an intention. Like, what's your intention with the conversation, right? Anyway, it's good to partake in like free-flowing conversations, especially the ones that don't really have an end goal, right? You shouldn't fear where it will go. Just go with it, and if you have no comment to add onto something, or you find yourself in situations where you cannot really add onto things because you don't really have an opinion or any experience that would lead you to have like a contribution to the conversation, that means that maybe you should enrich your life. Right? Maybe you should try new things. Maybe you should go out more often. Maybe you should have conversations with people who have the same taste and maybe the same inhibitions, right? It's all about, conversations are all about sharing experiences or sharing opinions, and especially the ones which are fun conversations. So it's like you have to sort of share what you think about certain things because of whatever you've experienced or whatever you've read or whatever you've seen somewhere or heard on like some certain radio show. So it's basically the more you know, the more you hear, the more you experience, the more you go out, the more you interact with other people, then the more you have to say about certain things. Like you can't talk about rain if you've know
never
nothing
seen
about rain.
it.
Maybe you've grown up in a place where
Desert.
it's always dry, like 24/7,
Ukambani.
365 days a year, So it's to answer that question is do more so that you can have more to talk about, right? Play more games so that you can have more to talk about with regard to games, right? So it's like the more you involve yourself in something, the more you'll have content to contribute on that thing, right? And then you never fear what where a conversation is going. You should be very comfortable with silences, right? You should be so comfortable in yourself to just be silent. That also comes from a point within yourself where you don't really mind losing the person you're having a conversation with. Maybe you're really struggling to try and impress them, and that's why you feel pressure to keep the conversation going, right? You should come from a place where you don't really care how the conversation goes. And so from coming from such a point, what happens naturally is even as you're communicating, you don't sound as needy as you would if you were trying to impress them. You sound more confident, more relaxed, and you don't really force anything. You won't even force laughter. You won't force to sound more interesting. And as a result of just that, turns out, funny enough, is you will become or you will sound more interesting to the other person. Right? And then you need to talk in a way almost as if you're not really afraid to express your opinions on something, whether they will sound controversial or inciting maybe to the other person. If you believe in something, as long as you're not really abusing the other person, then you need to express it how you want to, or avoid that topic if you really don't want to express it. But don't lie and don't fake certain things so that you might seem more cool to them. Just don't, because the more authentic you are, the more natural you seem, right? And you will never get caught off guard, right? Because I assure you, by trying to seem cool, at some point you let your guard down, and then suddenly the other person will be like,
you've changed.
Exactly. But it's not really that you've changed. Suddenly now your real you is coming out.
That makes a lot of sense.
So you need to experience more, do more, and build a certain persona about you that you're not really afraid to always be all the time.
You actually said something, yeah? I think it was in regards to this question, yeah?
Yeah.
Like, there's a time that, like, you have a conversation with someone, then you feel like this conversation is kind of boring, yeah? And I don't want it to continue. And you feel like if you change the conversation, like, the other party will never forgive you for doing it. So,
for example, like change the conversation.
like let's say we were talking about let me take myself as an example with a chick. I'll name her Mary. Yeah? So Mary and we were talking. I asked her about the glasses. Then she started talking about glasses. She just gets deeper, talking about the optician and everything. And the glasses was just an opener for me to have a different conversation with her. Yeah. But I really didn't have that kind of intention in my head. I just felt like I should be talking to this person seated next to me. Yeah? So I'm feeling like I should change this conversation in regards to, let's say, like I want us to have, let's say I want to bring in a flirtatious conversation. But if I start flirting with her at that moment, it'll be like weird and awkward, you get? So I feel like she will not forgive me if I change the conversation and start flirting with her. So from me, I figured that I got away with it when I stopped her from talking. Then I was like, by the way, a friend of mine and I were talking about A, B, C, D. And then she jumps onto that. As in, I've gotten away with a couple of conversations where it was sliding off to a boring conversation because she was like leading it. Yeah. Then I brought up my friend. Then it went ahead and got like a whole lot like sexually because okay, she spilled her drink on herself. Then she was like, "Guy, I'm wet," and I was like, "I bet you are," because I pushed her. So that's how she ended up spilling her drink. Yeah, it was on her shirt. But at that time we were talking about. Let me just give the whole story as it is. Yeah. We were talking about she was being girlish and saying she understands nothing about sports. And I was like, "You know nothing about sports?" Then she was like, "My brothers watch this and that, but I'm not usually there. They see them watching boxing. I don't understand what this is." And I felt like it was like really, really strenuous for the both parties. So I decided to change the conversation. So like the story I gave her was like when I'm with the boys at home, yeah. So I have like this doll in my bed, yeah. So a friend of mine, he usually comes and says, "If I get this doll and you're not around, you might just not see it ever again." Then I pushed my boy. So I pushed her the way I pushed my boy, and she had a drink on her hand. It was a soda, so it's nothing that heavy, yeah. So it spilled on her. Then he was like, "Ona sasa, you made me get wet." Then I was like, "I bet you're wet." So like most of the time you find out that you get scared, like you don't know how you're going to get away with a conversation. And I felt like getting a reason, like let me call it a hook. Yeah? You're going to use this hook to swing you to the other conversation. So like hooks are like really good conversation tools to be using. Do you ever find yourself using hooks?
Myself, so I have to confess, I'm not very good with conversations, or I don't hold them too long for too many times, or for too long. What I usually do, especially in situations where I want to change from one conversation or from one topic to another topic, is you might actually use hooks, which is actually a very good technique to do. But well, let me just get the context. For this certain situation that you were in, did you know the person before you were talking about glasses?
No,
you didn't know them. So, in my opinion, whenever I am starting a conversation with somebody new and I intend to have them become like a sexual or an intimate partner at some point in the future, what I usually do is if it's an indirect approach, such that it's not really me talking to them about me wanting them, like directly from the beginning. If I start off indirectly and we are talking about glasses, I make sure that the conversation about glasses, or the section, the bit about glasses, is very short. Right? So it's like within the first few minutes, you change it immediately, so that you don't last on it like for long. So like you talk about glasses, and you're like, "Oh, but anyway, I noticed blah 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 blah," or like, you change it as soon as possible. Right? Because the longer it drags on, the more weird it becomes, and you want to change it. And then another thing about feeling awkward about mentioning certain like sexual innuendos or implying anything sexual is, it only feels weird if before that point you've been acting as if you're not sexually interested. From the beginning, if you come off as the kind of person who's... I used to do this when I was much younger, so it also came with the personality. I used to come off as very cheeky and very... I used to come off as if I didn't mind probing people's boundaries. From the beginning, you could even how I approached you, even how I was looking at you, you could know like, oh, this is somebody who's not very, very conventional. I used to come off very provocative from the beginning. So even if I say something that is off and kind of provocative, it is still congruent to my personality or for the persona that I'm giving off. So you don't really think of it as being weird.
Yeah.
But if I come off to you as very straightforward, not really straightforward, very upright and maybe Christianly and suit and tie, and I don't really mess around and I keep to to the lines, then if I mention something off, it will seem very off.
Weird.
And you might want, as a woman, if you're talking to a woman, they might want to react like as though you mentioned something cringeworthy. You see. But if from the beginning you're very freestyle and just laid back, and you don't mind saying things that are off. Like from the beginning you say something like, "Oh, I like the glasses," and then a few comments about after a few comments about the glasses, you switch immediately to something like, "Oh, by the way, that dress comes off very sexy on you because it lets out your hips in a certain way." But then you don't make her feel weird about the compliment. You don't have to maybe put too much detail into it. You just say something light, and then don't stare at whatever you're commenting. Just something light.
Make it casual.
Yeah, and then it's like you're measuring her comfort level. Then at some point you can switch it up to something else. But you can't go from hi, my name is Andrew. And then next, can I touch your pussy? It's like you have to gradually get to
build on it.
Yeah. So the thing is, you will only feel weird if it is against the kind of persona that you're coming off as. And secondly, if you're taking a huge jump. So what you do is you just take smaller jumps, right? You still want to mention the wetness, but you have to take smaller jumps. Mention something slight at some point, then let it build, talk about something else, and come back and say something more bold, bolder, until you just say something, very, and by that time, it's like she's ready for it.
Yeah, she's comfortable with
it
completely. Yeah, that makes sense. You actually touched on a whole topic that I wanted us to talk about, but we'll get there later, yeah? So, have you ever let a woman steer a conversation?
I think so, a few times, of course. I think so, yeah. I think I have.
And how did it end up? As much as you don't have those lengthy and heavy conversations.
Certain situation. It wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. What I can say is I didn't have as much attraction for them as I would have if I had led the conversation. Maybe it's not really even tied to that, but I wasn't really as attracted to them. Yeah.
So it was when you let them lead, they won't lead it to attraction. Only few of them will lead it to an attraction phase.
No, I actually saw she was interested and she wanted it to get to intimacy, right? So I knew as she was leading, it's and this happens even with most women. As a man, if you're leading them into something, it's like they know where you're going. So by the time they get there, they have been letting it happen. Right? Most women are very sharp, especially with social cues. They know exactly what's going on. Right? They usually do, by the way. They usually do. By the time you get to that point, it's kind of like she let it happen. You get? So it's I also knew where she was trying to head with the conversation. So I let it be. And well, it got there, and after everything, even as I look back, I don't really think I was that much attracted to her. Because even as it happened, my interest wasn't as high as it would have been maybe with somebody who I'm trying to lead the conversation with.
Okay, for me, I've had different experiences.
Yeah.
Actually, I started the conversation, then it got to a point yeah, okay, yeah, yeah. And it was damn, why the hell is she like taking the conversation this way?
Yeah.
It's like she's killing it. He's killing it even before the bath is about to take place.
Yeah.
So that made me realize, like, man, I have to be leading the conversations like nobody's business.
Yeah.
Because it didn't happen once. It even happened with a chick who I had as my girlfriend. Yeah. She texts me good morning, and I reply good morning. Then it gets into interview mode, and it never gets out of interview mode.
But I think also you might have like a contribution, or like you might be playing a part in all of that, you know. Yeah, like the best way to stop some of those things is to train them. You don't let them know that you're training them, but like you just train them like subliminally. It's like take longer to respond to certain things, or kind of ignore certain things and change the topic to something else, or let them know that you're not really available between certain times and certain times, because you don't always also want to be involved in a conversation that you don't feel like having. You should handle the conversation the same way the girl would, you know. Not all through, but generally and specifically when it comes to the aspect of you need to be able to leave when you don't feel like having that conversation. Just the same way a girl would unapologetically leave a situation that she does not feel like is beneficial to her. If she doesn't feel like you're attractive enough to her that she should be having a certain conversation with you, you know, they would very unapologetically leave that situation, you know. So you should also be able to treat the same situation the same. Doesn't mean that when you're with your girlfriend you don't talk to her completely, but set some certain standards for yourself and be like, you know, if I'm not really feeling comfortable in this situation, I don't really have to have this certain conversation sort of thing. Also, you can also like don't encourage certain conversations by just not responding as well or as fast, or just ignoring and then coming back later and telling, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm usually not available during this and this time, I usually have this and this thing I'm doing, but we can talk now. Or I actually prefer phone calls because maybe on the phone call she will not interview you as much. So you can just train them, you know, so that they know, like, oh, you know, Andrew doesn't really like to have aimless conversations at 10 a.m. in the morning on a weekday. You know, he only prefers to talk maybe at 7 p.m. and he prefers to actually call at 10 p.m. sort of thing. Or he likes to have certain things told to him a day earlier, blah, blah. You need to train them sort of thing.
You're not just going at it just like that.
Yeah, don't let them take charge.
So that's basically our goal for today. We actually said, wait, what do they call when you're starting to build a house? The first thing.
Foundation.
Yeah. So we've actually built a foundation of conversation skills. So these were actually conversation goals. We've talked about intention. We've talked about value. We've talked about fear. So basically, at this point, someone can comfortably go out and meet up with someone, anyone, random, and like basically have a conversation with him or her.
Yeah.
It's okay, like, to have fear. And actually, I've remembered something. You're actually talking about time, yeah? So I figured when you're meeting up with someone, be it for the first time or the first like 15 minutes, 10-15 minutes around there, they don't actually remember whatever it is you've been talking about. Like people usually say, like, you can't have a second first impression.
Yeah.
But people usually forget that first impression unless it was like wild.
Yeah.
As in, it was like wild.
Also, something important to mention about that is how you come off the first time before you even set up the date really influences the flake rate for this woman or for that first date. It's like if you come off as very fun, you made her laugh, she enjoyed your company, and then you asked her, are you free on certain days? What do you usually like to do? We can probably do that next weekend. How about let me get your number and let's plan out this and this event that's going to come. If you come off as very fun, it's a very high probability that she will show up. You can even see it in her and how she responds. Very high probability she'll show up. Maybe something happens in between and she doesn't avail herself, but very high likelihood that she actually shows up if you came off as somebody she would like to spend time with. But if you were kind of very stale, your energy was low, you didn't seem very fun,
You were not fun.
at all, then even if she agreed to all those things, there's more doubt now that she, maybe a day before, that same day, she will cancel, or she just end up not really giving you the number, telling you, I'm not really comfortable, blah blah blah, giving out my number, but you can have my Instagram, blah blah blah, so there's all that.
Yeah, so I was talking about like the first 10 to 15 minutes. I figured that this is where like she has to get comfortable, and you on your other hand, you've been giving yourself pressure, like you have to create a good first impression, blah blah blah. I think that a guy should also take the first 10 to 15 minutes like to compose himself, to set himself up for whatever his or her goal is out there, because you'll find out that this fear, this anxiety, it's like overclouding your brain, that you're not getting yourself comfortable to like create a good conversation or something of the sort.
Yeah.
That's why I intentionally said the first 10 to 15 minutes, someone usually forgets whatever they were saying, even if you greeted him or her, or you said something so obnoxious, like she was angry, then you like made a joke in a serious situation. They'll forget about it in the first 10-15 minutes. Then the conversation afterwards, that's when maybe she'll be more conscious about it.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's all for today, folks. We'll see you guys in the next episode.